The numbers coming out of China's construction sector do not seem to match what we think is possible. Last year, a single Chinese factory shipped one finished construction machine every 30 minutes, all day, every day. Right now, a power line carrying more than 1 million volts is running across 3,000 kilometers of desert, turning sunlight into city lights. A canal that took 20 years to build is quietly pushing an entire river's worth of water from the south of the country to the north, supplying drinking water to more than 100 million people. And the strangest part is not any one of these projects. It is that they are all happening at the exact same time. China has decided to build its future all at once, not one piece at a time, and the scale of what is under construction has no modern parallel anywhere on Earth. Think about that for a second. Most countries struggle to finish a single highway expansion in a decade. China is building entire cities, moving rivers, and stringing power lines across continents in the time it takes other nations to hold public hearings. If you are enjoying videos like this, please hit the like button because it takes a lot of effort to put these together, and subscribe so you do not miss the next one. What you are about to see is not a plan for someday. It is real. It is happening today, and once you understand how all the pieces connect, you will never look at the word infrastructure the same way again. Let us start with the one fact that ties everything together, everything at the same time. Here is the single fact that changes how you see this whole story. China is not working on one giant project. It is not building 3 or 5 or even 10. It is building dozens of the biggest engineering projects on the planet all at the same moment right now as you watch this video. A tunnel machine as wide as a 5-story building is cutting through rock in one province. A city designed from nothing for millions of people is growing out of farmland in another. The highest bridge on Earth is carrying trucks through the clouds. In a third, a network of walk-in tunnels is being carved under the streets of more than 100 cities. A canal longer than most countries is moving water from one end of the nation to the other. Power lines carrying over 1 million volts are stretching across 3,000 kilometers of desert. New islands are being built from the seafloor. A space launch center is expanding to send up hundreds of satellites in the coming years. Every single one of these is either done or being built right now. They are not happening one after another. They are all in progress at the same time, pulling from the same pool of engineers, the same construction teams, and the same money. Any one of these alone would be the biggest building achievement of most countries. China is doing all of them at once. It is like watching one person run 8 marathons on 8 different continents at the same time and finishing all of them before most people could tie their shoes. The compounding effect of doing all of this simultaneously is something no other country has attempted, and frankly no other country has figured out how to attempt. But to understand how that is even possible, you need to look at the layer underneath all of it. The part almost nobody talks about. You need to see how China built the ability to build the factory that makes factories. Most people look at a new bridge or a new city and ask how it was built. The better question is, who built the machines that built it? That is where the real story starts. A single factory in China ships one fully tested concrete pump truck every 30 minutes. Not every day, not every week, every 30 minutes, all day and all night without stopping. To put that in perspective, some Western construction equipment makers take days to build the same type of machine. Imagine a car factory that produced a finished car every 30 minutes. That would be impressive. Now imagine that the car is a 30-ton machine with a computer-controlled arm that pumps concrete 50 meters into the air. That is what this factory is doing. That factory, run by Xiong'an Heavy Industry in the city of Changsha, uses more than 100 robots working around the clock. A computer brain sorts out which parts go where, which humans are needed, and what to build next. It redoes the plan every 15 minutes to keep up with demand. If a part arrives late or a robot needs maintenance, the system reroutes the work in real time so the line never stops. The factory is so advanced that the World Economic Forum gave it a special name, the Lighthouse Factory. That label is only handed to a small number of manufacturing sites worldwide that represent the absolute cutting edge of industrial production. But here is what makes this matter on a global scale. Sony is not even the biggest player. A company called XCMG based in Suzhou is the 3rd largest construction equipment maker in the world. It builds cranes that can lift 1,200 tons, which is roughly the weight of 900 cars. It also builds tunnel machines made for the specific rock found in China's southwest where the mountains are steep and the geology is unpredictable. In 2023 alone, XCMG spent over 4 billion yuan on research. That is more than many entire countries spend on infrastructure research in a year. These companies are not playing catch-up with the West. They passed several Western competitors years ago and are now the ones setting the pace. And their machines do not stay in China. They are building projects across 68 countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The machines building roads and ports in those countries are Chinese machines made by Chinese robots guided by Chinese software. China did not just learn how to build big things. It built a system that builds the tools to build big things faster than anyone else can. It built the factory that makes factories. But having the tools is only the start. The real question is, what happens when you aim all of that power at an empty piece of farmland and say, build a city built from nothing in 4 years? In April 2017, the Chinese government said it would build a brand new city called Xiong'an on farmland, about 100 kilometers from Beijing. They said it would be as important as Shenzhen in the 1980s or Shanghai's Puang district in the 1990s. A lot of outside observers smiled politely and said, "We will wait and see." What happened next surprised almost everyone. In just 4 years, the project received more than 400 billion yuan in investment. A high-speed train line connecting the new city to Beijing was finished by 2020, cutting the trip to 50 minutes. Think about that. A train that did not exist in 2017 was carrying passengers at 350 kilometers an hour by 2020. That timeline alone would be a major story in most countries, but for Xiong'an, it was just the beginning. The city was designed from scratch with no old systems to work around. There are no power poles anywhere in Xiong'an. There never will be. Every wire, pipe, and cable sits in underground tunnels built before the first road was paved. When a power line needs an upgrade, workers walk into the tunnel and make the change. No jackhammers, no closed lanes, no traffic jams. The streets were designed for self-driving cars from the very beginning. Lane widths and intersections were shaped for vehicles that drive themselves, not for human drivers. While other countries are trying to figure out how to add self-driving tech to roads built 50 or 60 years ago, Xi'an simply started fresh. It is like the difference between trying to teach an old dog new tricks and just building a new dog that already knows the tricks. The city was also designed so that owning a car would not make financial sense. The public transit system with self-driving buses and underground trains was planned to be so good that the cost of a car would not be worth it. There is a real difference between making a car inconvenient and making it economically irrational. Inconvenient means you can still own one. You just feel mildly guilty about it. Economically irrational means the numbers genuinely do not add up. And the biggest natural feature, the Baiyangdian wetland, was not filled in or paved over. It became the heart of the city, with buildings going up around it and water cleanup running at the same time as construction. A city for 2 to 5 million people is growing around a wetland instead of on top of one. That describes something that has essentially never been done before at this scale. Most cities in history were built by paving over wetlands and rivers. Xiong'an is doing the opposite. Xiong'an is not done yet. It will take another 10 years or more. But what is already built and working today has almost no match anywhere in the world for the boldness of the plan and the speed of getting it done. But Xi'an sits on flat ground. What happens when the ground drops away into a gorge 565 meters deep? Bridges in the clouds and cities below ground. China has built so many record-breaking bridges that the records barely mean anything anymore. More than half of the highest bridges on Earth are in China. Over 100 Chinese bridges rank among the world's longest or most complex. The superlatives stop meaning very much when they apply to approximately 40 different structures at the same time. Instead of listing them all, let us look at one that shows how far this has gone. The Baiyangdian Bridge in Guizhou province opened in 2016. It sits 565 meters above the river below. That is higher than any other bridge on the planet. To put that height in perspective, if you stacked 5 Statue of Liberty monuments on top of each other, the bridge deck would still be above them. The gorge is so deep that the 2 construction teams building the towers on opposite sides could not see each other through the clouds. They had to use GPS and lasers to line up the towers because conventional surveying tools simply did not work across that much empty air. The bridge deck was built by pushing sections out from each tower, held up by temporary cables until the 2 sides met in the middle. With winds changing at every height, the 2 halves had to come together within a few milli. They did, When the two sides finally touched in the middle of that cloud-filled gorge, the gap was so small you could not slide a coin between them. But the most important thing about this bridge is not the record. It is a regular highway bridge. It carries trucks, buses, and cars every single day. It connects Guizhou, one of the poorest and most mountainous parts of China, to the rest of the country. Before this bridge and others like it, getting goods in and out of Guizhou took days of winding mountain roads. Now it takes hours. The engineering is not sitting on a shelf. It is part of daily life. And while bridges climb into the clouds, something else is happening far below the streets. China is building a second world underground. Across more than 100 cities, over 10,000 kilometers of large tunnels have been built under the roads. These are not small service pipes. They are big enough to walk or drive into, usually 3 to 6 meters wide. They hold power lines, internet cables, water pipes, gas lines, and heating systems all in one place. When something needs fixing, workers go in through the tunnel without ever digging up the street above. The distance of these tunnels is roughly the distance from Beijing to Los Angeles. Below those tunnels, some cities are adding even more. Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen have underground highways that move traffic under the city center without consuming surface land or dividing neighborhoods with above-ground roads. Several cities are testing underground freight routes with self-driving electric vehicles to move goods without adding to street traffic. The surface of the city is no longer the whole story. There is a whole second city beneath it. But even bridges and tunnels only go so far. What happens when a country decides the rivers are in the wrong place? Moving rivers and rewriting the rules of power. If you asked an engineer in the 1950s to design the biggest water project they could dream of, they might describe the South-North water diversion. Then they would probably say it could not be done and move on to something easier. China built it anyway. Since 2002, the project has been moving water from the Yangtze River in the south, where it is plentiful, to the dry north, including Beijing and the North China Plain. That plain grows about half of China's wheat and a third of its corn, but its underground water has been disappearing for decades. Without this project, the breadbasket of northern China would slowly run dry. The project has 3 routes. The eastern route has been running since 2013. The central route, a 1,300-kilometer canal from a reservoir in Hubei province up to Beijing, has been delivering water since 2014. The western route, which needs tunnels through the Tibetan Plateau, is still in early stages. The central route alone crosses more than 500 rivers and streams. In one spot, the canal runs underneath the Yellow River through a tunnel drilled through the riverbed. So, the diverted water flows below the Yellow River, then keeps going north. Depending on your engineering sensibility, this is either beautiful or slightly absurd. Frankly, it might be both. Since starting, the project has moved over 500 billion L of water north. It gives drinking water to more than 100 million people and has measurably slowed the draining of the northern water table. No country has ever stepped into the natural water cycle at this scale. The Romans built aqueducts. China moved a river. China also faced a power problem that was just as big. The energy was in the west and north, but the people in factories were in the east and south. Sending electricity 2,000 or 3,000 kilometers over normal lines wastes too much power. The math simply did not work. China changed the rules by using ultra-high voltage direct current, a method that sends power at extreme voltages with much less loss over long distances. This technology had been known for decades, but the engineering challenges of operating it at the voltages needed to make 1,000-kilometer transmission viable had kept it largely theoretical everywhere else. By 2023, China had more of these lines than the rest of the world put together. The Chongji to Guan line, finished in 2019, carries 1,100,000 volts over more than 3,000 kilometers from Xinjiang to eastern China. It is the highest voltage power line ever built, and it runs every day. This is what makes renewable energy work at scale. The Gobi Desert in the Xinjiang region has extraordinary solar and wind potential, but it is far from where people live. These power lines turn desert sunlight into city power in Shanghai. Without the grid, the resources would sit unused. With it, they power a nation. But China is not just building on land it already has. In some cases, it is making new land from the sea, manufactured islands, and a gateway to space. Some projects do not build on the land that exists. They make new land where there was only ocean. Land reclamation is not new. The Netherlands has done it for hundreds of years. Japan rebuilt coastal areas after World War II, but what China has done is on a different level. Between 2013 and 2016, China created about 3,200 acres of new land on 7 reefs in the Spratly Islands. Ships with giant suction tools pulled sand from the seafloor and pumped it onto the reefs. The islands grew fast enough to see from space within weeks. Runways, docks, and buildings came next. The satellite imagery made the construction visible to the entire world in near real time. Setting aside the political questions, the engineering alone is remarkable. Workers built in open water with almost no protection from storms at distances from mainland supply chains that complicated every aspect of logistics. And the structures have held up for a decade. On China's own coast, reclamation has added tens of thousands of acres for cities like Shanghai, Tianjin, and Xiamen. Entire new districts, ports, and airport extensions sit on land that was seabed within living memory. The Pudong International Airport, handling over 70 million passengers a year, sits largely on reclaimed land. That is not an experiment. It is a functioning piece of critical national infrastructure built on ground that was manufactured from the sea. Then there is the project reaching upward. Everyone talks about China's rockets and space station, but the ground setup gets almost no attention. The WC Space Launch Center on Hainan Island opened in 2016. It is China's most modern launch site, and the only one near the ocean, which makes it easy to ship in rocket parts too big for roads or rail. At 19° north latitude, rockets from there need less fuel to reach orbit, saving money on every single launch. A new commercial launch site is now going up nearby, built to handle the fast pace needed for launching hundreds or thousands of satellites. Companies like Land Space, Galactic Energy, and KS Space are planning constellations of low Earth orbit satellites for communications, remote sensing, and navigation. The ground station's fuel systems and control centers are being built before the satellites go up, not after. China has learned from its